Welcome to the Thrive Co podcast, exploring the inner side of success. I am your host, Nikki, and each week we will explore the mindset shifts, personal growth, and everyday tools that will help you to navigate ambition, manage stress, and build a life that actually feels good on the inside. Through solo episodes and honest guest conversations, we look at what it really takes to grow, change, and thrive in the modern world. Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Thrive Co podcast. How are we doing, guys? I hope you're all good. I know I say that every week, but I genuinely do. I mean it. I really, really hope that you're good. I hope you've had a good week. If you're listening to this as it comes out on Sunday, I hope you've had or are having a great weekend. I hope the sun is shining where you are. I've had a bit of a week of growth, I would say. I've had a week of really some quite negative thoughts initially, and then catching those thoughts and trying to replace them with more positive ones, which in turn led me to have some strong words with myself and some real honesty, to be honest. And it was as a result of the catalyst that I'm going to talk about today. So this episode actually it was sort of two parts, and I'm going to talk you through it, but it's really come about because there are areas in my life at the moment where being vulnerable, not just with other people, but actually with myself and being like really honest, has brought about the best change. It's not easy. It's not fucking easy at all, but it's been the catalyst of change. And I thought if that was landing for me at the moment and something that I was experiencing, then it's probably something that a lot of other people are. And if you're not right now, then you definitely will be at some point, because we're all human, right? So people say that they want to be more vulnerable and more authentic. Like, I think since social media has come around, and originally it was all roses and butterflies and filters and aesthetics, and especially with the rise of Instagram, right, it was a complete highlight reel. And I think as social media has become less and less in its infancy, and people are getting a little bit tired of seeing curated perfect aesthetics, there's still a place for it, but I think people are craving more authenticity, more vulnerability, and more realism, right? I know I am, and I know that when I've been more real in my content, and I show up not wearing makeup and talking about the things that are happening, and the washing machine going off in the background, and my dog barking at the delivery man, it's not this perfect studio setup, and I get better response and engagement from showing and sharing real life than I do when it's like the perfect curated feed. But I do think that it's still something that people struggle with, and I think there's a few reasons for that. And this is something that I've been really thinking about myself, and really trying to process and understand why it is a struggle to be not so much authentic, because I think you can be authentic without being vulnerable sometimes. Like, I can show up authentically one day in energy of like happiness and joy and excitement, and there might not be anything at that point that is like deeper to be sharing. But then there are days where I know myself, I've shown up feeling pretty shit, and I've just sort of put a mask over it, and I can see it in other people as well. So it's around being the right amount of vulnerable for the situation, but actually noticing when maybe you are putting a mask on or not feeling safe enough, which is really what it is about, isn't it? It's about knowing that you feel safe enough to share with the people that are going to receive it, or the platform that you're on. And, if you've ever felt like you hold back or overthink what you say, or you just can't fully be yourself around people, it's because normally you don't feel safe enough to be the level of vulnerability that you would be around people that you do feel safe enough around. And when I say safe, I don't mean like physically you're going to get hurt. I just mean that fear of like judgment or of repercussions on sharing at that level. So a couple of things have happened for me over the last 2 weeks that have really led me to kind of explore this and to try and understand it. The first is that I am in, it's called the accountability group, but to be honest, it's not just accountability. Accountability for me is like you set a bunch of goals and then you report back on whether you've done them or not, or, you know, your progress. And then if you're being a lazy ass, people pull you up on it. There's an element of that in terms of like if somebody shows up week in, week out, and they're saying they want to have done something, then the others will pull them up on it if they're not doing it. But it's not to pull you over hot coals for the sake of it. It's because we know how capable everybody is. But actually, it's more like an emotional support group. It's more a place where people show up entirely vulnerable and allow themselves to like share completely. And when I say people, like we have all walks of life in there. So there are other coaches, there are people who run their own like engineering and design businesses, there are people from the NHS, there is a lady who lectures in the Middle East. There's like the people in this container are so diverse. Some are parents, some are older, some are living in the UK, some are not. And it's people from all walks of life, but it's such a nice group because it's one of the only spaces in my week where everyone shows up as they are at the time. Like it might be that, like, for instance, the lady from Qatar has just been displaced because of the war. So her whole life has been thrown up and, you know, she's sort of faced now with, where do I go from here? So that has been a really, really scary time. There's other people in the group that have been having parenting struggles. I've obviously been really in the thick of it with pivoting my business and trying to understand who my audience is now and who I'm pitching to, and then building Thrive Co. So everybody is going through something. And some weeks people will show up and be like, I feel fucking great and I'm smashing it. And other weeks there will be tears and, you know, sometimes people just can't even talk. They'll just show up and listen. But the reason that I love that group so much is because no one is wearing a mask. No matter how, in inverted commas, successful somebody is, there's always stuff going on. And it's where you realise that, you know, it's not just performative. Like I find platforms like LinkedIn, for instance, to be real dick swinging contests. It's very much about like what I've done and how I've done it and how amazing I am. And yes, of course, there has to be an element of that and showcasing your talents and achievements because it's a professional platform where most people are trying to build their client base. But also there's a real lack of vulnerability on there from most people. I'm not saying everybody, obviously, it's, you know, it's nuanced, but so this group is the place where that really happens, and I've absolutely loved being part of it for the last year. The other thing that happened, and this is really what was the catalyst for the conversations I've been having with myself the last week and also for this episode, is I'm in another kind of like goal setting group. It's called the 100 Days group. I've spoken about it on here before. It's a group of me and my friends who are like the more ambitious friends in the group. Not that I'm saying other people aren't ambitious, but those that are goal oriented, let's say. So we'll, you know, set more rigid goals or things that we're aiming for. The original idea was that we would do it over 100 days. So each 100 days, we would set a set of goals for ourselves, and we would then check in every week or every 10 days and talk about our progress, and other people would make suggestions and like congratulate you. And over the last 5 or 6 years, it's changed into a group where it's just one of the first places we share achievements. We might ask if people like know anybody in a certain space, but it's not really as rigid and structured anymore. And some of the people in that group are incredibly successful, like multiple 6-figure earners, top of the field in what they do. One of my friends has just run the marathon, and there was some celebrated achievements in there, some shared achievements that people were celebrating from one of my friends that then led on to a discussion about what other people had achieved. And I felt myself get very, I don't really like the word triggered, but triggered. It wasn't a trauma response, but it was definitely something inside me constricted, and it made me feel like, oh, because I just didn't feel that way about myself. I felt like I wasn't on, I'm building at the moment, but there's nothing to kind of really shout about in terms of success from a professional perspective. And so I didn't respond. And then after a couple of days, I wrote back in the group just saying, I don't want anyone to take my lack of response as like rudeness. Like, I'm not being ignorant. Being really honest, I've just been a bit triggered by the achievements. I'm so happy for you guys. You're all incredible. But it's made me reflect on actually what I have or haven't achieved. And do you know what? Being that vulnerable was scary. I didn't want people to think that I wanted a pity party or that I was having some sort of like mental breakdown, but I just needed to say it. I was like, this isn't normally me, but right now it is. And actually this is like what I'm dealing with. And, is it a big problem? And no. And I was talking to my husband about this. I was like, if I put all of our problems into a hat with everyone else's problems in that group or that I know, I would be like racing them to take my problems back out of that hat, because in the grand scheme of things, I'm the happiest and most content I've ever been. And, a lot of them pointed out, isn't that the goal? Isn't that the overarching goal, to just be happy and content? And yes, of course it is. That is absolutely what it is. But there's also a part of me that has a low level consistent anxiety over the fact that I don't have the stability of a salary or, a stable income, and it's all on me to make that. And whilst I'm pivoting, that has taken a hit. And I can't just bury my head in the sand and think positive thoughts and be toxically positive and hope that it all fixes itself. And my husband said to me, actually, which I hadn't thought about, he was like, don't forget, you're the only one in that group that runs your own business, that has, gone on your own. Not that is, I'm not saying that's a bigger achievement than anyone else, certainly not. But it is definitely putting yourself out there, and it is definitely something that you have to take into account when you're looking at other people's achievements. Because if you're wearing every hat and you are, being your own administrator and marketing and social media, and I'm also trying to build ThriveCo on the side of running my main business. He was like, it's not as linear or straightforward as some people's careers where they've got one job and that's what they focus on 9 to 5 in the week, or 8 till 6 or whatever it might be. So just giving me that kind of reflection was really interesting. And it also led me to having some really honest chats with myself and with ChatGPT. I'm not going to lie. I've also reprogrammed ChatGPT now to stop consistently blowing smoke up my arse and to challenge me. And some days I don't want to talk to him because of that, because he gives me the absolute fucking real truth that I just need to acknowledge, and I don't like it, but it's helping. It's definitely helping. So that is actually a little tip. If your ChatGPT is constantly telling you how amazing you are, go into the settings, into personalization, and just tell it to be like, your own best friend who doesn't pull any punches, challenges you, wants the best for you, but won't just sugarcoat things. It definitely helps. So with the help of that, and also my own kind of self-reflection, it made me realise that actually the inputs that I'm putting into my main business aren't enough to create the outputs and the income that I need. And without being really freaking honest with myself and vulnerable with myself and with that group, I wouldn't have had those realizations. I wouldn't have had the feedback and the honesty that I got and the conversations with my husband that then led me to be like, okay, I need to look at this. I actually need to pull my socks up and give my head a wobble and look at what I can do to control this situation, because right now it's running away from me, and I'm almost like sitting there in a pity party whining about how hard things are. But the point of this is that the vulnerability created a closeness, because then off the back of that conversation, or that like reply in the group that I made, I had 2 or 3 people separately message me saying, I'm so glad that you wrote that, because I'm struggling with X, Y, and Z. And actually from the outset, you wouldn't know that. One of them, for instance, is a single parent, and they really struggle with, you know, the lack of freedom. They feel like all they do is work and parent. Another one is single and would really love to have a partner to share it with. And even though they're successful in their career and you know, professionally, that part of their life, they are really looking at other people and getting that kind of pang of jealousy, I guess. So it's interesting, isn't it, that from the outset you can look at people's lives and think, fuck, they've got everything. Like, they're so well traveled and they've got so much freedom and they've got this loving family and their career's amazing. But there's always something that other people want that you've got. And you don't know that until you're vulnerable, until you open up. And like in the coaching group that I'm in, you can look at these people. I would look at these people on LinkedIn and think, they've just got everything together. And you don't realise until you're in the spaces with them that they are just fucking humans having an experience like you are. And we all shit the same, and we all have family issues, and we all go to bed thinking of things that we've said the day before, and we all get anxiety dreams during stressful periods of our life. And everybody is just having a human experience, regardless of how much money they earn, or regardless of how well thought of they are in their particular industry or sector, or regardless of whether they have their own business or this incredible family or tons of money. None of it actually matters, but you only find that out when you have these vulnerable conversations and you put yourself out there. And so for those of you that are regular listeners to the show, or maybe you know me personally, you won't have been able to get away without hearing me talk about Simprove. Simprove is a scientifically backed, water-based probiotic drink. You drink it daily, and it has been scientifically proven to help with things like bloating, IBS symptoms, pain. It was actually a dietitian friend of mine that introduced it to me last year, and I honestly wouldn't be without it now. It's helped with my energy, with my bloating, it's helped with my immune system, and also things like my skin. The list is honestly endless. Now, I have got a code for you. So if you'd like to try Simprove, you can get 50%, that's a massive 50% off your first 3-month subscription by going on to simprove.com and putting in the code Nikki50. That's NIKKI50, or clicking the link in the show notes. It's not really just about opening up more. It's about, why does that feel hard in the first place? And for me, I think it's because we've been so conditioned through social media and through, I mean, I don't know what age everyone is that listens to this, but I know a lot of my listeners are in a similar boat to me, in terms of like in their early to mid 40s. And we were brought up in a culture, especially in the UK, of like, you don't really talk about your feelings. Like, we were bedroom kids that would go and cry in their bedroom. And the new generation, fortunately, seem to be a lot more like open, and they'll share and they'll talk about things on social media that we wouldn't dared have done. So it probably feels a little bit edgier to us than it did to them, or like generations that come after them. So there is that kind of social conditioning of, you just don't talk about your feelings. You just don't talk about things honestly. And then there's also our own identity playing into that. Like, I am the person that helps to coach other people through tough times, through their own, building their own vision of their life. There's a part of me that still feels that if I open up to other people about my vulnerabilities, will they see me as capable enough to do that? And actually, it's ridiculous, because my coach opened up to me recently about something that's been happening in her life with her health. And it made me see her as a human being rather than this like person on a pedestal. But that made me want to work with her even more, because I was like, she gets me more, rather than, you know what it's like, you might follow like a YouTuber or somebody on social media and they get to a certain level of income or earnings and they'll buy like a boat or they'll go to all these exotic holidays, and suddenly you find yourself relating to them less and probably interacting with them less. And so it's natural that when you open up and you're vulnerable to people, they see you as more relatable. But isn't it funny how we can see that happens, and yet we're so scared to do it ourselves, or so nervous, and we're not that forthcoming with it. So it could be an identity thing at play. It could be that, you know, in your family you're seen as the strong one, or you're seen as the the parents, that you don't want your kids to see you vulnerable or emotional, when actually in reality it's really good for them to do that. Or maybe you're running your own business and you don't want your employees to see you as the one that doesn't have it all together. Or maybe you're like me and like super type A and have everything together, and you're very organized and you don't want people to see you as potentially not having the answers. Whatever it is, I can promise you now, it's bullshit. There isn't one time that I can remember in my life where being vulnerable hasn't created better rapport and closeness. Even in professional lives, like I hear my husband on his meetings and calls with clients, and the way that he creates rapport without oversharing and overstepping the mark is a thing of beauty. It's incredible. And I like to think that I can do that as well. But I think sometimes when I'm working on behalf of other businesses, other search firms, I am more nervous, or more, they're just a little bit guarded to do that, because I want to represent that business in the best way possible. But actually, they've hired me. They've hired me as a whole human, as somebody who has a human experience and tons of experience in the industry and sectors that I work in. And people don't start suddenly thinking of you as less than capable and less experienced in your industry or your profession just because you share something about yourself personally. It actually creates closer connection. So those identities, those reasons that we give ourselves are normally bullshit, to be honest. And actually, when I think back to the times that I have opened up and have been a bit more vulnerable, it has created a closeness that, you know, putting on this complete professional persona 24/7 just doesn't do. Now, don't get it twisted. Vulnerability isn't oversharing. It's not giving every detail of every area of your life. It's not dumping everything on people. It's not being emotional 24/7. But it is letting yourself be seen without controlling the outcome. It's sharing things that maybe you would normally filter in certain circles or certain circumstances. And it's taking away that performative version of yourself and just letting the mask slip a little bit. Like, it's less about saying more and more about hiding less. And I think that's the real key. You don't have to say everything, but when you let people see behind the curtain a little bit, they feel like they know you. And the last 2 occasions that I've done this recently, it's been a resounding success. And it wasn't like I went into those occasions with all those circumstances with the end goal of creating more closeness. It was just the byproduct of what sharing more and what showing myself more gave in that situation. So if you've built an identity of being the one always in control, or always having it together, or not needing help, parents do this a lot, especially mothers, or being the calm one, or being the one that looks after everyone, whether that's in a professional or a personal context, you would really do well to maybe let that slip from time to time and let people see the real you. You can't control how somebody responds to that. And this is what I wanted to say. It's not your job to control how someone responds. If there are people in your life that don't respond well to it, that will tell you more about them than it ever will about being vulnerable. And you need to make note of that. You need to, if there's people that send me shit on social media after I record a video or share something, it's not for them. And that's fine. Like, I'm not for everyone, babe. I'm just not. But it also no longer derails me, because all of the people out there that have seen that and maybe had a positive response or it's resonated, that's who I'm doing it for. I'm not doing it for the one or two trolls or toxic people that are dealing with their own stuff and therefore respond negatively. So don't avoid it. Don't overmanage it. The only thing that I can share really about my experience lately has been, it's been authentic. I've not gone into situations with the intention of being vulnerable. It's just happened. But what I've noticed as the outcome has been like super positive. And I think, you would do well to think of where in life are you filtering and where could you afford to be? And I see this a lot in the professional world, whether it's with like client meetings or with employees or even with business partners sometimes. I see the level of professionalism that goes in, and I think you would do well just to drop that down a level or two and let people actually see the real you, because we're people and people want to work with people. They don't want to work with the product. Like, have you ever seen on Dragon's Den where they'll say, I'm not a mad fan of the product or the product needs work, but I like you. And it's where they've seen something in someone because of their vulnerability and because of their story. That is what people buy into, in essence. So how you can practice this is, like, don't over rehearse what you're going to say. If you're doing a presentation or a meeting, or you're showing up on social media, or you're having to have a conversation with your kids or your employees, try and speak more from the heart. Like, people can tell when you're over rehearsing something. If you're only saying 80% of what you feel and that you're holding back, as long as it isn't because it's going to really like set the cat amongst the pigeons or piss somebody off, or, if it needs saying, then say it. Be careful how you're phrasing things, right? This isn't about going in and, calling people out just how you feel it, because it needs to be managed properly in terms of the wording. But there's ways of saying what you feel without being an absolute see you next Tuesday. If you make jokes sometimes instead of just being honest, this is a big one for the men in my life. A lot of the men in my life will cover up their real feelings and emotions with humour. And actually, I was watching Married at First Sight Australia recently, and there was a guy on that called Danny. He was a British guy that had moved to Australia, and if you've seen it, you'll know what I mean. But he used humour to deflect in situations where his partner was being vulnerable. And it completely derailed the relationship. I mean, there was a lot of reasons why that relationship wasn't great. But, a lot of it was because he was covering things up with humour. So if you tend to do that, try maybe not to do that, or catch yourself out and see if you can create moments of vulnerability instead of just like deflection. A big one in the UK is when people say, it's fine. Oh, yeah, don't worry, it's fine. Instead of saying, do you know what? Actually, I'm really going to struggle to meet that deadline, or I'm really going to struggle to find that information or to do what you're asking of me, and this is why. But actually, I could do this instead. Instead of saying it's fine and taking on all of the pressure and all of the stress, maybe admit to people when your skill set doesn't reach that far, or where you need a bit of help or support. Because if you're not speaking out and you're not being vulnerable about needing the help, nobody's going to know that that's how you're feeling. And the biggest one for me was avoiding certain conversations completely. I would have things to share online but not say them, because I'd think, who needs to hear that? I'd like second guess myself. I wouldn't have the conversations that I needed to have with family members or friends because I was scared of hurting their feelings. And actually, as long as you're doing it in the right way, as long as you're thinking about them as well as what you need to say, you're a good person. So this is sometimes just about protecting yourself or protecting the other person. And you've just got really good at doing that. And vulnerability is now about having those conversations, sharing 10% more of your truth and pushing yourself to like that edge, noticing where you're holding back, and maybe initially practicing doing this in like the safest environment. So maybe with your partner or your best friend before you go, creating an Instagram account and sharing your truth with the world. Maybe do it in baby steps. But honestly, for me, this is probably one of the biggest breakthroughs I've had this year in business, with my husband, with conversations around finance, with my friends, with pushing back and saying no and sharing with them like where I'm at, maybe mentally, with the groups that I've just shared with you. Vulnerability is something that the right people will recognize and they will appreciate. And if they don't, then they ain't your people, whatever walk of life that may be in, or whatever area of your life. So I really hope that that's helped. It's really something that has been so important for me this year. Please, 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 as always, go and follow the show. If you're listening each week and you've not pressed the follow button, please do that. It really does help. Please share on social media. Send this episode to a friend. I feel like this is one of those episodes that people could benefit from. If your friend is just starting to build a business or a social media presence, or they are, somebody that really struggles with this stuff, share this with them, because sometimes it's good them hearing it from somebody else that they don't know, rather than like you saying it to them, because people can be funny, can't they? Like, I know if one of my friends says something to me, depending on who it is, I can get a little bit like, ugh, icky. Whereas if I hear it on a podcast from a stranger, I'm like, oh yeah, great idea. But I hope you have found some positivity in that. I hope it's landed. Have a fantastic week, and I will see you all again next time. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, make sure you are following the podcast, and don't forget to share episodes with a friend who may need it.